Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Why am I singing Wade in the water? Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crumbs here at Crumbs Studio. Thank you so much for clicking and tuning in and joining us. If you have not, please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe so that you are up to date and you know and you're notified when our episodes are streaming so that you can listen. Today, I have a guest in our studio. So let me give him a formal introduction. I didn't even introduce myself. Let's go back. Hi, I am Shanice Parker, the host and commentator of Crumbs podcast and visual podcast. I am so happy to be here with you. And now I can introduce my guest that I have in the studio with me today. His name is Richard Parker. He is the owner of Rich Cuts Lawn Maintenance based here in Kansas City, Missouri. So he is a business owner and entrepreneur who has recently left corporate America to pursue his business full time. He is a father, a son. And if you can't tell by now, he is also my husband. So welcome to the studio, sir.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
We pray that this episode is not cringy, but we like to banter each other, throw a few jabs. So don't be thrown off by that. That is completely healthy for us in our relationship. Today we're actually going to be diving into a topic that is, it's kind of heavy. So we're going to start with something light. Okay? So I'm going to say 2 words, and you tell me which one you like more.
All right, cool.
Okay. Even though I know most of these. Everybody else know. Nike or Adidas?
Nike.
Don't say that so strong. We might have a future sponsorship. Nike. Let's see.
Nike.
Ice cream or brownies?
Both.
Ice cream or Martin or Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Martin.
Black or blue?
Blue.
GMC or Chevy?
They're kind of the same company, but
Pick.
GMC, since that's what we drive.
Okay. That's all I got. Give me some.
Tennis shoes or heels?
In this season of my life, tennis shoes.
Why?
Because my knees be hurting and my hips be hurting. We working on it though. I be trying to strut, but really I be feeling like a brand new reindeer when their knees be buckling like Bambi. That's how I be feeling, trying to keep it together because my knees be hurting real bad.
Football or basketball?
Now more so football.
Fantasia or Beyonce?
Fantasia.
Why?
Why Fantasia over Beyonce? I used to be a Beehive member, but I've also always loved Fantasia. I don't know, I just feel like she registered with my soul more. Like when I sing her music, my soul is glad. I love her. I love her vocal performance. I love her presence on stage. And every single concert we went to with Fantasia has been an amazing concert.
Yeah, I've never seen Beyonce live.
I have.
You did?
When she came to St. Louis, and it was a good concert.
I forgot you left me.
It was a good concert, but to me, it still did not compare to a fake Fantasia concert. Like she really leaves her soul out on the stage. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for playing that with us. What else? Let's see. What are we talking about today, Mr. Parker?
You tell me. What are we talking about?
I'll talk about it. So we're going to discuss something that has been relatively prominent in our lives. I'll say really heavy the last year. And that is being the family members or being loved ones of someone with addiction. And so we have experienced this. We both experienced it in childhood with our parents, and then as of late with another very dear loved one of ours. And so it's been a kind of heavy. The effects of addiction has been kind of heavy, the last year with those around us. And I know that you said God had really kind of put it on your heart to start speaking to other individuals, particularly young men, about being the product of addiction, being the product of a parent with addiction.
Well, not necessarily a parent, but in my case, it is a parent, but I mean,
just a loved one in general.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's really important to talk about. I know us personally in this marriage, both of we can be specific with addiction. I think because there's different forms of addiction, right? Particularly for us, it's alcoholism. So, both of our fathers, let's be very clear, are alcoholics. And so we both grew up very different, but we had something that was very common amongst each other, and that was being the child of a parent with an addiction. And so we can just kind of dive into, let's talk about like our childhood. Do you think that we grew up the same or similar?
No, complete opposite. Complete opposites.
Mm-hmm.
I say I grew up with parents who before I even say that, so my dad used to work for the water department of Kansas City. My mom worked some hospital, I don't remember. But as time went along, my dad said, I'm going to open a janitorial service. So he did that. He quit his job. Business started booming. Like really booming, making tons of money. So that's how I got to the entrepreneurial spirit.
Well, that is something we have in common, though. My father was an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but everything, that's similar, but the totality of our childhood is very different.
Okay.
I grew up with both parents in the home.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't grow up with both parents in the home.
Mm-hmm.
You're, like I said, you grew up with your mom as a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
I had both.
You had siblings?
Siblings. I
did not.
6 siblings, or is it 6 of us total? When my parents got married, my mom had my brothers, my dad had my sisters, and out of that came me. So yeah, you was by yourself. I got a ton of cousins, aunties, uncles, big family on both sides, really. You got you.
No?
Well, you had Stefan, but other than that,
you got you. So specific.
So,
I had my mom, I have my uncles, I have my aunts, and before my grandmother passed, I had my grandmother.
Yeah.
So very small family on my maternal side of the family. So were those the major differences in how we were raised?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's others, but yeah.
So yeah, that would be I would say the major differences in our upbringing was he had the privilege of growing up in a actual like family, within the home. So he had his brothers, he had his sisters, his mom, his dad. And then economically, like he also had aunts that, a really big family. He had aunts that would like take him on trips and like he had a really good time growing up. Like you had a really good childhood, would you agree? Right? So he had those type of experiences, whereas when I was growing up, it was really me and my mom, and she had her siblings, but as far as like our everyday, all of my traveling was done with either my mom or the church. We both did grow up in a Christian upbringing, so both of our mothers made sure that we were raised in church, and so the foundation is Jesus, and I will say that. So they both gave us Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So when it comes to, there is also a difference too when it comes to the financial aspect of it, because growing up, your parents they did become entrepreneurs, and when they became entrepreneurs, they were able to make a substantial amount of money, which, was able to provide you a certain lifestyle, as a child. Richard did not go without. And so he'll always say that. So the difference between him and I is my mom did raise me in the home by myself it was one parent, and so she did the best that she could. She would get up, she would go to work, but it was all about survival. So when we came together, I think one of the biggest struggles with us was he had no understanding of what lack was. His life has been very full and plentiful. And for me, I hadn't really experienced the plentiful. So you have someone who's free, who just thinks abundantly, like it's going to come, it's going to flow. And I'm like, no, we got it. We got to hold on to it. We got to save it because, I always grew up in survival mode. And part of that was because my father was not present and my father was not in the home, even though my parents were married. So the caveat to all of this is we're going to get a little bit deeper. The caveat to all of this is my father was not in the home. He was not present. He was not a present parent. And I think majority of that was due to him being or overindulging in alcohol. I think that there's other factors to it, but of course today we're going to focus on that because that was a really big factor. And so when I was a kid, I would just be so upset. I knew that my father drank. I knew that my father drank excessively. That was never an understanding that I did not have. I remembered even from like a little girl, like one of my earliest memories, I understood that of him. I understood what a bottle in your hand was. So my dad wasn't present in the home because of his addiction, but your father was present in the home physically, right? How did that work with him? How did him being there in addiction go hand in hand?
So he was there physically. He was there. There'd be days where, like I said, physically he was there, but you didn't get everything as a child that you should get because he wasn't there. He'd be drunk, whatever the situation may have been that day. So like growing up, I would always hang out with my daddy. Like we would go, he would take me places he definitely shouldn't have been taking me. I would go sit in the car, or I would be at the particular place sitting on the couch while they were gambling, drinking, doing drugs, whatever the case may have been. I was there. I'm probably 7, 8 years old, seeing things that normal 7, 8-year-old kids shouldn't see. So as time passed, as I got older, I realized that a lot of the problems that we did have in our house came because the alcohol, or came because of the alcohol.
Okay. So I hear you say like you were with your dad, you would hang out with your dad, you would share with me all of like the cutest stories, y'all. His daddy would pick him up every single day from school and take him to the corner store and buy him a honey bun.
Every day.
Those are like his fondest memories, right? Which was super unhealthy, but it was really sweet of daddy to do that. So he did not spend time with you. He did spend time with you, I would say, at least for the younger years.
Yeah.
But he took you places that you weren't supposed to be, right? Environments that you weren't supposed to be in. And do you feel that at that time he was just being, because you have siblings that are older than you. You are actually the youngest out of all of the siblings, right, by far. So he had experienced fatherhood prior to you. I don't know if he had really experienced fathering a son, because all of his biological children were daughters. So this was his first time really experiencing fatherhood to his son. Do you think that in those moments where he was taking you to those environments that he was just, as an adult, do you see it as, oh my God, how could you do that? That was extremely reckless and selfish. Or do you see it as, I mean, he was spending time with me, so he was just parenting how he knew best to do?
Part of it, as I got older, I would think, like, this is real selfish and dangerous. Like, cause y'all out drinking, drugs, and I'm a kid. Now I'm in the car with you after you done did all this. So you drunk driving. So it was very dangerous. But I also looked at it as we was just hanging out.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a whole lot.
You enjoyed being with him?
I enjoyed being with him,
not
not enjoying everything else. But I enjoy spending time with my dad, yeah.
Absolutely, and I would concur with that. Even though my dad wasn't present, I always had the desire for him to be present. So for me, addiction affected me because I feel like he couldn't keep his word. You know, hey, I would call, are you coming to get me? Yeah, I'm coming to get you. You know, I was the kid that was always waiting by the door. And I would wait and wait and wait and just be like, this time he's going to keep his word. But you grow up and you realize that when you can't really keep your word when something else has you like so bound that you can't even keep a commitment to yourself.
Sometimes I think that they don't remember their word, because maybe when they said, yeah, I'll come do this or we can do that, maybe he said it in a drunken state, and then when he's sober, you don't even remember he told you that.
Maybe.
I've had that experience.
Maybe, but I've also had the experience where they remember a whole lot when they drunk. My point being was, when you have someone who is suffering from addiction, addiction is a disease. Alcoholism is a disease. We just gonna keep it 100, right? It's a disease. It's also something that it has you in bondage. So when you have someone who has an addiction and they are wanting to commit to you, and of course we are not speaking for everyone, we are speaking from our experiences, but my experiences is very hard for them to keep their word with what they're going to do, because every single day they are not keeping a commitment to themselves, right? And so for me, I would want to be with him. When I would see him, like, I would enjoy the time with him. And my experiences were pretty similar. You know, when I would get the opportunity to spend time with my father, I would be places that I really shouldn't have been, or, you know, he wasn't as, you know, we weren't at the crack house, but there was still definitely activity and things that I saw as a young child that I shouldn't have saw, and it definitely shaped some of my experiences as a teenager and as a young adult. And that goes like to my next question. When did you start to realize that my experience in those places and my experience of having a father with addiction has shaped a part of who I am? Do you know when that clicked for you?
When did it click? Maybe about between 10 and 12-ish, I would say it clicked, because at that point in time, I started to see the effects of it. Like, as I got older, like before, he would take me these places, I'm not really understanding what's going on. I'm just there. But as I got older, 10, 12, 13, around that age, I'm like, yeah, this ain't this ain't it, because I also start to experience the effects of that.
Yeah.
So as far as like I said before, we had the business which was doing amazing, but then I would see I would see business not doing so great because you can't even get the work done because you're drunk. But not only is it that, the people you hired are just like you. So not only are you drunk at work, everybody at work is drunk. So no work is getting done. No work is getting done at all. So then my mom, on the other hand, having to deal with the business side of it all, having to talk to the clients, apologize to the clients, explain to them, lying to them, coming up with reasons why we couldn't get the work done by 6 a.m. the next morning.
Understand. So you said a lot right there. So you started to recognize that there was something, the impact, because when I was phrasing that question, I was actually talking about in adulthood. But in childhood, you started to realize that the things that my father are participating in is causing this response in my home. So you are saying, like, you are realizing, like, okay, because my dad is always in a different state, he's disoriented, he's not working, we're not bringing in the finances to be able to stay. Like, your lifestyle starts to change, right? When wives are carrying stress, your mother starts to change. The environment in the home starts to change. Things are shifting. There's arguing. There's fighting. You're hearing your mother lie, so she's changing characteristics about herself. So that brings us to how addiction completely. And he hired individuals who were in the same state as him, right? So that all goes to environment. So who you surround yourself with will either
make you or break you,
feed your addiction. And that's on any level. Like, if you addicted to food, and every time all your friends want to do is go to restaurants and buffets, like, they're feeding
600-pound life.
They're gonna stop it. They're feeding your addiction, right? If you're trying to stop smoking marijuana, but all of your friends or people you associate with, they smoke, you're going into environments where the behavior that you are trying to rid is being fed.
Unless you're strong enough to be in those environments and not do it.
But when have we seen that happen?
No.
That usually comes with time.
Right.
That usually comes with...
If I might be going a little too far ahead, but by the time I got to college, then I started smoking weed. And, just doing it too much. Honestly, just doing it way too much. And then I realized that that's not what I want to do. Because as I seen my dad with alcohol, I could see myself going down the same path, but just with marijuana. And I said, no, that's not the life I'm living. So I could be around, everybody in the room could be getting high. Not me. Everybody.
But I think that's a present thing, because we're going to keep it honest, right? Because we said we're honest and transparent on this podcast. So when you and I first started dating, you were not a heavy smoker by any means, because I wasn't.
But at that point, that's when I started stepping back from it.
You had started stepping back, but in the midst of us dating, there were still times that you engaged in it, right? So my point being that I feel like you really have, before you go back into those environments, wisdom would say, I've experienced some form of addiction. Yours may have not been extreme, it may have not been long standing, but I've experienced my body craving and desiring something, and I probably should not go back into that environment until I am, first of all, set free, delivered, and really do have the willpower to do it. To be 30 days clean and go back into that environment, I don't know if that's the best. I don't know if that's the best.
I'm not giving that advice for people to do.
I'm not. But I'm saying, I think you should really use wisdom and wise judgment And, because when those first 30, 45, 60, 90 days, when you are making a decision to change something about your life, it's essential. And then you can literally make one wrong decision by putting yourself in the wrong environment. And now you're finding yourself back at, either the same place or worse place. And then you have to start over. Whereas we really could have just stayed away from the environments, right? And we could have not had to experience that struggle again. And you made me forget my question that I was leading into when we were talking about environments.
You were saying
it's gonna happen sometimes, though.
Do I feel like that environment shaped me?
I didn't ask that question, but that is a very good question.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
You did ask that question. But anyway, yes, that definitely, that environment itself, yeah, it shaped me. It shaped me to be who I am, because I knew that till this day I don't drink. I can tell you the last time I've gotten drunk, well, one or twice. I only did it once or twice, but that environment shaped me for who I am. That environment shaped me for the example I want to pass along to our children. The example I want to pass along to my nieces and nephews and anybody that's around me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that definitely shaped me.
Yeah, so just like you shared your belt, I would say from age, it was kind of short-lived too. But, once I was about age 19, 20, into 21, I had a bout with alcohol. And I found myself overwhelmed with life and with things. I found myself enjoying the taste of alcohol. I would get off of work. I wasn't even supposed to be able to buy liquor, but I was able to go purchase alcohol. So I would get off of work and I would go, and it may have just been wine coolers, or, it got a little bit heavier into rum. Like Bacardi was, my drink of choice. And so I started to drink. And I would realize that I would start to drink before I would make dumb decisions. So, for example, right? I believe that you should wait until you're married to have sex. And at this particular point in my life, I was dealing with a lot of conviction because I was having sex, right? Prior to me and Richard meeting. And so before I would go to do that act, I would drink. And then one day I remember being like, why are you doing this? Like, I started to see this pattern of drinking, doing things that was normally out of my character. I've never been a big partier, but I would drink and then I would go out. I had to drink in order to be comfortable enough to go out. Like, I was drinking in order to do things that for me, I was not extremely comfortable with. I shouldn't have been doing. I didn't, it was just like I'm drinking almost to like drown conviction is really what it was. That's what it felt like. And so right when my oldest son came to live with me, it was a habit that was pointed out to me very clearly. And I remember one day looking in the mirror and I could see my father's reflection clear as day, almost like he was looking back at me. And so, at that point I was like, okay, we're going to have to wrap up on the drinking. Okay. And I've had an occasional drink since then, but that I had a bout with it too. So both of us learned, like, this is what life could look like. It was almost a warning, like, based on what we had seen our fathers do. It created, when we were able to recognize, is what I want to say, like, as much as that what they did pained us, we were able to see what had happened to their lives, recognize, hey, this is a habit, this is a curse, this is something that is creeping up on us. I believe God brought that to both of our revelations, and we were able to let it go and release it.
Have you ever asked your dad, like, what is the cause of the drinking? Like, where did it start? Like, why are you doing this?
So I'll say this. Me and my dad have never been mature enough. Like, our relationship has not been mature enough to have certain conversations. There were, I think the last conversation that we really, like a really deep conversation was really surrounding like my mom and their marriage. He had finally opened up to me about that. But even in that, which we can talk about, this actually can roll us into like the effects, okay, of alcohol. So, you know, it's my truth too, right? I'm trying to be very mindful of how much I say. But my experience with him while he's drinking is he's not kind, right? So, you know, we done seen all kind of different alcoholics. Some of them funny, some of them, you know, want to crack jokes. He is not kind. And, you know, generally when I see him, he is usually always in a state of not being sober. So him and I have not had the privilege of having certain conversations, like really deep, heartfelt conversations. He's never let me into that space. I believe that I have asked the question, but he's never let me into that space.
I think we've had the conversation. I've asked my dad, like, so what's up with this? And his response was, I've been doing this since I was 12, 13. And it was one of those things where everybody around me was doing it.
Yeah.
But I think it's deeper than that. And he didn't ever tell me, like, go into detail of why. I mean, I think I kind of know why, but he wouldn't go into detail of telling me why.
Yeah.
So,
you know, but how many things start off as like, that's why you have to be careful, right? Because, I mean, it can be the most innocent thing. Some things start off as just, oh, everybody else is doing it, let me just test it out, right? And then it turns into a habit, and then it turns into a coping mechanism, and sometimes some people have never really had the time or the privilege to deal with trauma or hurt or heartbreak or depression or anything, because they have always just coped and suppressed. And when you're in a constant state of suppression, I don't know if that's a word, but it's going to be today, how do you face the realities? Like, how do you face your reality? I don't think you can.
I think I could be wrong, but I think in his instance, it's a generational curse. I feel like
absolutely
from the understanding that I have, his uncles, his cousins, the people in his family, they all, or not all of them, but a lot of them have the same issues.
Same in mine.
Drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, a lot of other things too. But it's just, I really think it's just a generational curse.
Right, but why though?
Well, partly it's because, like you just said, nobody ever dealt with it. And now that I don't even want to say that, in my 32 years of living, so old, I said, we're going to stop this here for my family going forward. So when it comes to me drinking, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So then when our kids get to the age, will they be around it? Maybe.
But it's not been an environment that we've created.
They've seen their grandpa, their pawpaw. They've seen that with him. And then there's been conversations with them to, like, Daddy, why is he drinking that? Or Papa, why are you drinking that? And it's just hard for me personally. It's just hard to have those conversations, trying to explain to them why. Because I think at the age that they are now, it's just kind of hard to. Maybe they do understand it, but
I think that they understand that it's something that he's not supposed to do, and that's the thing. Kids are so wise, and they're so wise. I will commend us both for, we haven't been perfect parents by any means, but one thing that we did commit to when we got married, I actually think it was a pact that we made on our honeymoon. We committed to not, I don't even know if it was necessarily drink altogether, but we knew that alcohol would not be permitted in our home. We would not be drunk. We just would not engage in alcohol. And again, we'll have occasional glass of wine. When I say occasional, I mean like once a year. We'll have that occasional thing, but for us, it was because we knew that, hey, you coming in, you got it. Me coming in, I got it. And not only can alcoholism, we know that it is a generational curse. We know that it's spirit rooted. Everything has a spiritual root, right? But it's also hereditary.
And it just leads to other problems.
It does. It opens the door. We knew that we did not want it to be a normality in the environment that we were raising our children. So, they're not going to have, my mom was drinking. No, that is not the environment that they are being brought up in. And so we did make that to honor one another in that way. You ain't gonna be tiptoeing in the house drunk. You know what I'm saying? I'm not coming in the house smelling like alcohol. We're not bringing it into our home. And even our loved ones, they know that. They know, and they respect it. Just everyone is on the same page with that. So I do commend us for that, because at the end of the day, we can't make the decision to disrupt the curse. We made the decision to say, no, the buck stops here. And we're making the decision that our children, now unless they grow up and decide that that's what they're going to want to do, but I've already covered my children in prayer, that, it's just going to be different. It's going to be different, right? But this does lead me to one thing, because, and then I guess we'll have to kind of wrap up, or maybe this will just be a two-parter. It leads me to, okay, it's two things that I want to hit on, right? The first being the emotional effects of being a child, of someone with an addiction. And then two, how it has shown up in adulthood, how it has manifested itself in adulthood. You get what I'm asking?
How the effects of it?
Yeah, so how did it affect you emotionally as a kid? And then what effect did it have on you, or has had on you, or may still be having on you? Because let's just be honest, it's still something we're dealing with as an adult.
Yeah, I struggle with as an adult, because that's now. I struggle with it a lot now. To see, okay, I'll start with this. So for the past, how long? We've been married 7 years. So I'll just say 8-9 years. For the past 8 to 9 years, if I didn't talk to my daddy once a day, or at least once every other day, he would call me, didn't even want nothing, just calling.
Mm-hmm.
Whether he was under the influence or whether he was sober, it's oh, cool, my daddy's calling. When I look at my phone and say, oh, this is who's calling, you kind of get that feeling of, yeah, I get to talk to my pops.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to a couple of months ago, you see the effects of what alcohol can do to you when you don't take care of yourself, and all you think about and only thing you put in your body is alcohol. So just watching him deal with that whole situation, like it definitely took a big toll, like emotionally. Emotionally, it was rough. So,
well, let me okay. So, yes, let me rephrase my question because I can do that because I'm your wife. How has it affected you emotionally, not just in the last few months, but how has it affected you emotionally, as in how you process your emotions?
Here, okay. So as a kid, I would see things like things that he would do. It's kind of hard for me to say what I'm thinking without going into detail, but it's kind of hard for me. The things that he would do when he was under the influence, as a kid, you just feel like you can't really explain that. Like you can't. Maybe I could have, but at the time, I was like, I just would hold it all in.
You would repress your feelings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, as a kid, if I'm doing that as a kid, and you just hold on to that, like every time something happens over childhood to adulthood, you just hold it in. So I think that's how that affected me emotionally. Without, I'm not
into a great deal of detail.
I would say my advice to anybody is don't do that. Let it out. Because eventually, if you don't let it out, it'll kill you.
It eats you up. As your wife, I concur with that. And of course, we'll have another episode, y'all, later on sometime in the future where we talk about one of our biggest hurdles in our marriage, which was emotional availability. And so, you know, your trauma presented itself as being nonchalant or just being cool and laid back, which he very much so is. You know what I'm saying? He the coolest, you know, that I know. He's cool, calm, and collect. But he would project like, I'm cool, everything good, like nothing mattered. And I mean nothing. But it's like that's not true, because God created you with feelings and emotions, and you're saying that everything is fine. I'm talking about happy feelings or sad feelings. There was like nothing. He kept us the same constant state of emotion. Okay, it was
in the best times and in the worst times.
In the best and in the worst. And it would be like, I would have to ask him, are you happy? Yeah, I'm happy. But there's no outward appearance of joy, right? And so because he was so used to suppressing his feelings and his emotions, it presented itself as being just emotionally unavailable. And that became a really, really big struggle for us, because it's like, I don't know if you happy, I don't know if you sad, I don't know if you angry. And I would have to overwatch his body movements and body language, and I'm always guessing, which I'm always assuming, and you know, it just became a really big issue in our relationship, which fed into my emotional issue, which was rejection. You know, his kind of manifested as suppressing feelings and emotion because he felt like he couldn't say anything about anything. And I always battled with rejection. I felt loveless. I felt not wanted. I felt not desired. And I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about just in general. Like, that was my constant state of being. When you are not prioritized by those who are supposed to love and care and provide for you, and I was pursuing relationship, right? And it didn't all stem from my father. You know, some of it stemmed from my mother, some of it stemmed from what, things people would say. But in my parental relationships with the both of them, to be honest, the enemy planted a seed of rejection in me. I would pursue the relationship with my father like nobody's business, y'all. Like, I would run away to go find him, okay? And every time it would come back around, he would not receive me the way that my heart desired. And so here you go, like rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. And that caused me to do things and behave certain ways that I shouldn't have. So here you go, like here he is emotionally suppressed. And because he can't express emotion, it is feeding my rejection, because it's like I'm here I am again, like reaching out for you, and your desire, your intent is not to reject me, but that's almost like the byproduct of it, because you don't have the capacity to open up to me emotionally or talk to me or share certain parts of you. And so here we are in a cycle, a cycle that is just, it's a constant cycle for years and years and years. To be honest, we kind of just got out of it. Like, if we want to be quite honest.
I know this ain't the topic, but
you gotta stay on the topic.
I know, but hear me out though. It ain't the topic. It kind of goes hand in hand. But so I remember one of our disputes, which kind of is the topic of rejection, but not
addiction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You were crying.
Why was that funny?
Because hear me out. It wasn't funny, but you were crying,
mm-hmm.
and like we had the conversation, but in my mind, I'm thinking that I failed at being a husband because of everything we just said. Not intentionally failing like that. I'm not out here cheating and doing everything else, but just seeing you like that in the conversation that we were having made me feel like I fumbled the bag here. Made me feel like I was failing in marriage, and that was honestly that's one of my biggest fears. Failure in marriage and failure being a parent.
Yeah.
And actually, that would have went hand in hand, because if I would have failed at that, not necessarily failed at being a parent, but
no, we still would have been amazing co-parents, and that's
well, we're not gonna be
okay.
co-parents.
We're not, but I'm saying I don't think.
But
that's not what I was saying.
I know, but anyway, that's made me think about that.
Yeah, and that conversation opened the door to this level of transparency in our marriage. We knew going into the marriage that we had issues within ourselves, because we did premarital counseling, and she asked the questions. She definitely asked the questions, but you still don't really know how it shows up in your adulthood and marriage and even other relationships, because I didn't just experience or feel rejected by him. It was in friendships too. It was something I was carrying. You don't really know how that shows up until you're living it and you're in it and you're experiencing it. You just don't know. But one thing marriage will do,
you're gonna let it all come out.
It will reflect like your issue. So the entire time that I'm like, babe, what is going on? Because when we were dating, it wasn't like that. When we got married, I think just pressure and other things, reality set in, and there was just this deep emotional suppression. And so I'm asking, and what's going on? Am I your homeboy? Like, what's going on, right? Here we are, like, in it, and I then realized in the marriage through that, like, I'm trying to get him to talk to me, but the Holy Spirit is showing me, no, hey, you need to deal with you. Like, you have a spirit of rejection that is ruining how you see yourself, how you receive love, you know, how you parent. Even with my oldest son, it affected how I parented him just because it was so prominent. So it was almost like the more I was pulling at you, be present, be this, be that, the Holy Spirit was holding a mirror up to me. Like, the reason it is so painful for you, yes, it's happening, but it's because you have to deal with this. It is because your heart is carrying this thing, and it is going to overtake you if you do not start forgiving and start, releasing and start rebuking, all of those things, and really getting your heart together. And as I started to, it was a long journey, y'all. We still on the journey. But I saw that as I really started to dive more into my relationship with Jesus, he came along in his emotions and being more open and being more willing to have discussions. And we just started to be able to have transparent conversations like this.
And it all boils down to the differences that we had in our childhood. Or not necessarily the differences.
It's our traumas.
Yeah. But traumas.
Our traumas.
Mm-hmm.
Our traumas. And then not only is it important, and that's the other thing. Like, I want to be clear, because we're not trying to, single anyone out, but that part of our childhood has probably been had the greatest impact, negative impacts on our life. And when you are not willing to deal with trauma and heartbreak, and you're harboring unforgiveness, it's hard for you to love and parent and just live the way that you desire to live. The things that I want to do for my children, the fruit that I want to produce out of my children, it's hard for me to plant those seeds in them if everything is coming out of a place of hurt.
Well, maybe though, because if it's coming out of a place of hurt for you, for them, like what you're doing for them is because that you were hurt when you were their age.
I get it, but I think what I'm saying is it's in the method that you do it, right? So when I'm carrying all that I'm carrying, okay, so another big issue used to be me yelling. Not at him, because he can't say I yelled at him, but at my children. And it's because I was frustrated because I didn't want them to do things. But the reality was, the reason I was so overwhelmed and so frustrated is because I was parenting from that place. But when I said, okay, Lord, I need help because I am unintentionally creating trauma with my kids. You know what I'm saying? My intent is pure, but my action and my method and how I go about it, it is causing chaos. It is wreaking havoc. I in no way, shape, or form want my children to feel unloved because of my methods. Right? So I had to clean some things up, and now I can because I have the capacity to have calm conversations. I have the capacity with our baby girl when she's emotional. Old me would have been like, girl,
she's so dramatic.
Go in your room. But now I have the capability or the capacity to have a conversation with her about her feelings, because I can see and recognize, like, the place, that's not that. So when I had the time to clean up my own heart, when I took the time to allow God to come in and really heal some things, and he's still healing, you guys, the fruit is I am a better parent. I am a more patient parent. I'm a more patient wife. Don't do that. I'm just scared. Don't do that. Woo! So yeah, I think that's a good place to end it. You have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
You don't have anything? I feel like it was something else that I wanted to ask.
Ask it.
but I can't remember. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give me a notebook as I'm sitting up here so I can write things down because it comes to me, but then it goes so fast. It go faster than it comes. You know what I'm saying? But no, I think that we talked about a lot. I think that the last point that I wanted to make is how, like even with the like, we make these statements like, I don't want to be like my parent. I don't want to be like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, I'm not going to not be present for my children, because of this or because of that. And sometimes what happens is we inadvertently do what we're trying so hard.
You say you don't want to be like them, but in reality, you're doing the exact same thing that they would have done.
You're doing the exact same thing.
You're acting just like them.
Yeah, and that was one statement I said to Richard, and he did not like it. Okay? And it was a conversation we were having one day because he would always say, in regards to the alcohol and providing, he's always wanted to be a really good provider. And he saw, of course, how addiction affected that. And he was like, I'm not going to drink and I'm going to be a provider. I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to do this. But inadvertently, right, he started to display the same behaviors. He was physically in the home, but he was not present emotionally and intentionally in the home. And, just like, I was like, I don't want to be a mean parent. I don't want to be mean because I've experienced that. I don't want to be overcritical. I don't want to be neglect. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. And inadvertently, I wasn't being kind. I was not being patient. I was, loving as best as I knew how. But the exact same things that I was critical. Why you tie your shoes like that? I was extremely critical. And so it's like we try and strive so hard to sometimes be what we don't want to be that we become it. And as a man thinketh, so is he. So
as a man thinketh in his
it's hard, so is he. So if you're constantly thinking about it, your actions are going to display the thing that you're constantly thinking, instead of focusing on what you want to display. So we had to have that hard conversation too. Like, I know you saying that you're not like your daddy, but right now you showing up like him. And I know you said you wouldn't be like your mama, but you showing up as her, And we understand and recognize that in that season of our lives, our parents, well, I'm not going to say he did the best that he could do, but we understand now as parents that they are who they are and they were who they were.
Because of their traumas and all the stuff that they had to deal with.
That they haven't dealt with. That they still have not dealt with. And God has given us the grace and the mercy and the privilege to come together. And it has not been easy, but to say we're going to do it different. And then he was gracious enough to give us community. I have some really good, dope women in my life, my sisters, who say, hey, I know that this hasn't been easy, but you need to be a little bit more patient because you have to give Richard time to mature. Or you have to give him the opportunity to allow God to work on his heart just the way that God is working on yours. Like, it's so important to have community that is for healthy relationships, that is for you and not against you.
Get away from all those negative people.
I knew that was coming.
Because it bothers me so much.
So, God gave us the gift of each other, and we create a balance. But, it's a constant work in progress. It is a constant, I cannot live out of a place of trauma in order to be present and loving and kind and achieve what we want to achieve in this family. We can't stay there, right? So, babe, before we let the people go, you have to give them a crumb. You have to leave them with something to take on the road with them. What is your crumb of the day?
I'll keep it as what on the topic of what you just said.
Okay.
Have solid people in your life. Get away from people who aren't like-minded. I mean, y'all can be different, but want something out of life. Get close to somebody who's willing to help. And as far as addiction goes, if don't help them be addicted. Help them get the help that they need. That's if you love them, help them. That's all I got.
And then if you can't help them, you give them over to Jesus. Sometimes we can't help. That's the only help that they can.
Because Jesus is the only real help.
Hey, come on, say that louder. What?
Help is on the way.
That is not what you said.
I said Jesus is the only real help.
He is, right? So, love people where they are for who they are, and don't try to control what you can't control. You can only display love. And the Bible tells us what love is. Love is kindness, patience, as long as you can only display love and pray for people. But you can't be Jesus. You can't be Jesus. So that's all that we have for today.
Hold on, I got one more thing.
What, man? Full of wisdom today, y'all. What?
Book reach cuts.
This was not your bit.
Go ahead.
Listen. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, husband, for joining me today. Thank you for having a transparent conversation and being obedient to what God told you to do. And I'm sure this is just the first of many conversations. But thank you so much for joining us. Again, we are so excited to be able to share this space with you. If you enjoy our content, please do us a favor. Not only like it, but share it and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section. I would love to hear what you all have to say. Thank you so much. And you guys have a blessed week.